So I know Halloween's all done with, but that didn't really stop Nintendo from releasing Luigi's Mansion 3 on Halloween, meaning most people were playing the game in November instead of October, the spooky month of the year where the game is thematically appropriate. Thanks a lot for that one, Nintendo. I really appreciate it. I'm still playing the game, I promise. That video's coming out next. So, what do we do until then? Well, we took a look at Luigi's Mansion 1 last time. Only makes sense to take a look at Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, the sequel. Oh, there it is. Happy late Halloween, everybody. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon. This was actually known as Luigi's Mansion 2 early in development, and it even maintained that name outside of North America. And I gotta say, thank goodness, us Americans are terrified of numbers. Except for the number 3. That one's okay, apparently. Luigi's Mansion getting a sequel out of nowhere was certainly a surprise. The original would go on to sell well, review well, and elements of it made cameos in other games. Like Luigi finally had some defining character traits. That's more than we can say for Mario. His water gun in Sunshine that was conveniently also built by EGAD had a stronger personality than he did. But Nintendo was going in hard with the big titles for their brand new 3DS handheld. So at E3 2011, with one of the coolest things Nintendo's ever done with a dozen oddly shaped monitors, a new Luigi's Mansion was born. And this time, development was handed over to Next Level Games, the company responsible for the Punch-Out reboot, Super Mario Strikers, one of the best Mario sports games ever made, and how can we possibly forget about Ticket to Ride on the Xbox 360? That was a classic. I've only played through this game once before, back in 2013 when it was brand new. Clearly, I haven't been compelled to play it again since then, even though I've played the original game on both Gamecube and 3DS at least a dozen times. I adore that game to bits, but for whatever reason, clearly, once was enough for me, so after all these years later, I am very excited to take another trip to Luigi's Mansion 2. I mean Dark Moon. I mean, come on, Nintendo, Luigi's Mansion 2, Dark Moon would have been totally fine instead of splitting up the title across multiple regions. That's very, very weird. The adventure this time takes place in Evershade Valley. We drop in on Professor EGAD doing some more research with his crew of friendly green ghosts, and everything seems just dandy. But then we see a King Boo-shaped silhouette in the sky break the Dark Moon into pieces, scattering them across the valley and turning the once friendly ghosts aggressive. And, well, since Luigi handled the ghosts last time, he gets called upon to tackle some ghosts once again, getting ripped right from his home via his television. That's pretty good technology. And see, that's what you get for wasting energy leaving the TV on like that. That's foolish. Well, our goal's pretty clear. Find the pieces of the Dark Moon and take care of any spectral baddies that float in your way. Oh, and Mario got kidnapped once again too. Of course he did. You're losing your edge there, Mr. Jumpman. Also, can I say, some of the animations here just feel unfinished? Sometimes a character does a thing, and then they just stop moving. And now we go on to the portion of today's show where I try to do the cliche YouTuber thing and reenact the weird part of a video game that I just talked about. Hope it makes you laugh. The big change this time around is rather than having one mansion to explore every nook and cranny of, now we have 5 different mansions, each one with their own unique themes and gimmicks, and regular instances of being pulled out by EGAD since the adventure is now mission-based. I think this was done to push the portable gaming idea of playing a game in short sessions instead of long ones, but it doesn't make sense for this type of game in my opinion. When you're thrown into a mansion, you still have access to a good chunk of it, and there are benefits to exploration, such as hidden gems and bonus rooms, but being locked out of progression until you deal with some dialogue boxes and menus just doesn't feel natural, since you'll often jump right back into where you left off anyway, and it's not like the game isn't afraid to tell you to do some backtracking. It's no knock on the actual content of the game itself, but I'm not a fan of how this adventure is structured. Oh, and EGAD also calls you like every 5 minutes. It's terrible. Listen, alright, I get it. It's a very, very catchy ringtone. We're using the dual scream now instead of the Game Boy Horror, which is a hardware leap that I can approve of, but it's pretty annoying. Once we jump into that first mission though, oh, it does feel good to be doing this again. Walking around these dark and unknown environments, grabbing our trusted and upgraded ghost vacuum, the Poltergust 5000, and doing some good old-fashioned ghost busting, it feels really good. We're still not ripping off Ghostbusters, we swear. While each mission does technically have an original objective, everything you do boils down to going to a point specified on the map and sucking up anything that you run across. Especially when a lot of the missions boil down to go into this door. Oh wait, now you can't because they took the thing, go and find the thing. That happens a lot, and it does feel like padding at times, but at least the act of going and getting the thing is pretty consistent. There are a lot more puzzles this time too, usually of the environmental variety, which is really nice, but otherwise, it's a pretty simple setup. To help you out along your adventure, some changes have been made to the whole ghost capturing process. Aiming can now be done with the face buttons. You press X to look up and B to look down, which feels really nice. And to deal with crowds of ghosts, you now have access to the strobe bulb, a chargeable flash of light that does a much better job than just turning a flashlight off and then on real quick. And once you have a ghost, pulling them back now fills up this special meter that when filled up, you can do an extra powerful pull to take a bigger chunk out of their health. I really like this. The whole struggle that you have with the ghosts is half of the fun of the entire game, so having that extra incentive to not only suck them in, but to do it well, is pretty satisfying. The new dark light mechanic opens up some puzzle opportunities as well. It's pretty obvious when you need to use it, but the sound design behind it makes it a fairly gratifying item to use. Admittedly, I do still miss the elemental spirits from the first game. They were pretty nice. Regarding the types of ghosts that you tackle, they're handled pretty differently. Just from a design perspective, I'm not really a fan. They just come off as a whole lot more comedic, and I think the more sinister approach of the ghosts from the first game made them a more immediate threat. I mean, the common green ones just kinda giggle most of the time, and it really just takes me out of the whole idea of, oh no, spooky ghosts. There was also this one that was in the middle of using the toilet before Luigi comes in and ruins its day. I mean, yeah, I would be pretty mad too. But when it comes time to actually battle them, this was handled really well. Yeah, they are still pretty simple, and on the surface, you mainly only have 4 different types to go against, but the basic green ones will sometimes bring in weapons or have an extra bit of protection before being able to hit them with your light. And when you're thrown into a room filled with ghosts, which happens a lot, it's as fun as ever to take them all down as best as you can. There's also no equivalent to the portrait ghosts. That's a major blow. The standard ones don't really have all that much personality, and when they do get a chance to show it off, it's just, haha, we're just a bunch of goofs. But that would have been fine if there were more intimidating ones to go for that had some character, and there's just nothing here. There is this one special battle against this trio, the 3 sisters, but it's the only fight of its kind. They don't even have that much of a personality, it's just a mini-boss that pops up in a cemetery. But why isn't there more of this stuff? But what about the main bosses? Every single mansion has one final challenge before you move on to the next one, and they're not that great either. The first boss against the spider is really cool since it's one long puzzle using fire, but the others, you wait for the right moment and suck away. Where did the innovation go? One of the bosses is legit just an enemy gauntlet. There's a sort of callback to the Boolossus fight, which is kinda neat, but that's about it. And the chili ride fight. This is absolutely the worst. How did they let this happen? You gotta like aim these cannonballs to hit every part of this ice face, but there's always gonna be one panel that's near impossible to hit, and then oh look at that, all the panels came back. Oh hey, look at that. I hate it. It's not even like the ghosts behind these battles are interesting. They all end up just being the same weird looking spooky boys with like, oh, this one has 2 horns on it. Cool. But you catch them the same way every time. We're approaching a Paper Mario Sticker Star level of character variety now. It's not a good thing. These big brain guys are like the next best thing, but they yell nyak nyak, so I don't know, I think that kind of disqualifies them from being a threat. They sound like Jabberjaw. It is ultimately a matter of preference on how big of a deal the lack of a portrait ghost equivalent leaves on the game as a whole, but when the standard enemies are less of a threat and there's no bigger threat in sight, it just reduces the tension to an incredibly low level. And we already know King Boo is at the end of the game. He's literally one of the first things we see. Yeah, the dark lighting ain't fooling me on this one. He shows up in the background of a few scenes later on, which is kinda cool, but the surprise was gone a long time ago. It sometimes feels like I'm just completing this game for the sake of it, rather than trying to overcome any challenges that are thrown my way. That being said though, Dark Moon does do some really cool things, and some things I would say are better than the original. If Luigi's Mansion helped launch Luigi's personality, Dark Moon goes above and beyond to make sure that this green Mario brother is an absolute lovable goofball. I'm not the only one going along for the ride for the sake of it. Luigi clearly is too. There are cutscenes abound with a ton of minor voice acting, and like in every single one, he's presented as this big dumb idiot who has no idea what he's doing, and it's incredible. Honestly, this is where a good chunk of the fun in this adventure was had, just getting to see what Luigi was gonna do next. And they included a dog, Polterpup. This game is absolutely in my good graces now. Add an adorable dog into anything, and it immediately goes up like a good 3 points. And on top of that, the boos return. But instead of just being a thing to collect, there's only one per mission, and they're pretty well hidden. Capturing them ends up feeling like more of a reward, especially since now you pull them by the tongue and then they bounce all across the room. I love it every single time. Getting all of them for a single mansion also unlocks an extra time-based challenge to tackle. It's not much, but hey, at least it's something. And then we have the returning Toads, this time acting like more of an escort mission instead of just being crybabies like the first game. And I really liked these too. Sometimes you get to inhale the Toad and then shoot it across a gap, which is a game mechanic that I can't believe I said out loud. Sometimes they are absolute idiots, but they do more good than not. And even if this game loses a lot of the charm and atmosphere, I really like the idea of going through multiple themed mansions. There's a buried clock tower, a mining area on top of a snowy mountain, a haunted botanical garden. It's really cool. And the theming really does lend itself to some cool puzzles when you're not too occupied busting some ghosts. The music is alright, nowhere near as iconic as the first game's theme, but it gets the job done in my opinion. You also can't scream Mario's name at the push of a button. Yo-ho. This game is inching back closer to a 0 out of 10. And then, well, we all saw this coming. After we retrieve all of the pieces of the Dark Moon, we get intercepted on our trip back to Egad's lab and land in King Boo's illusion, where, making his grand reveal, King Boo. Now, seeking revenge for the events of the first game, this king takes advantage of the now frenzied ghosts to become ruler of the world. But listen, buddy, we have a vacuum, alright? Nothing can possibly stop me. It's a pretty alright final battle. You gotta use his fear of light to leave him under the spiked balls that he himself shoots up into the air, and then you do a chase segment in a little side-scrolling area, something awfully reminiscent of Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness, something I never thought I would say, and then you do that a few times, you try to suck him in with the poltergust every now and then when you have the chance, and in no time, he's back to being captured where he belongs. As I said, not much of a last battle. I think he did a better job in the first game, but oh man, does the ending ever make up for it. Luigi manages to pull Mario out of the portrait that he's trapped in thanks to his dark light, and once the Dark Moon has been restored to its original form, all of the ghosts become good again, and they regain their pupils. That was the true sign of not being evil all along. Just getting to see Mario and Luigi being so happy, like they're finally celebrating all of the work that Luigi put into getting into this ending. It's so heartwarming.
Thanks, my bro. Thanks, Mario.
Oh, that was just the most precious thing I've ever seen. And the last thing we see is Polterpup going to sleep in Luigi's lap. This is one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Nothing negative I've said about this game matters anymore. Well, before we wrap things up, I guess there is the multiplayer mode to talk about as well, the Scare Scraper, where up to 4 players take in the role of Green Luigi, Orange Luigi, Blue Luigi, and Pink Luigi work together to traverse a series of rooms in a variety of timed-based modes, like capturing every ghost, trying to find the floor's exit, and catching a bunch of Polterpups. It's a pretty enjoyable time. You know, I wouldn't say Luigi's Mansion is the type of game that needed multiplayer, especially since they had to just pull up a bunch of skins for Luigi and call it a day, but it's still fun enough if you ever get the chance to experience it. It can also be played online, so back when this game was new, it definitely added some replay value. Luigi's Mansion 2: Dark Moon is a really fun sequel, even though it's not the most faithful one. What it does do, it does pretty well, even though it goes against what the original game did so well all those years prior. The mission approach isn't ideal, and a lot of the charm is gone, but it's still a lot of fun. And honestly, the game is worth playing just to watch Luigi do things. I would pay $30 for that alone. And actually, the game was good enough to have an arcade version. I found a machine at a local Dave & Buster's, and I had a really good time with this. It's basically a 2-player on-rails game where you hold your very own poltergust to bust some ghosts on your own, and the theming of the game is obviously based on Dark Moon. Seeing a lot of this game in high definition in angles that you don't get to see in the main game itself, it's pretty cool. If you ever stumble across one of these arcade cabinets, I highly recommend giving it a shot. It's not every day you find a Luigi-themed arcade game nowadays. So this franchise covers the home console with the Gamecube, the handheld with the 3DS, we have a fun and quirky arcade machine, we have the Nintendo Land themed attraction, we can't forget about that, and then next time we're gonna take a look at the console handheld hybrid with Luigi's Mansion 3 on the Switch. I think Luigi's Mansion has covered a lot of bases. All we need now, take this idea Nintendo, is Nintendogs Polterpup Edition. At that point, Luigi's Mansion will have everything.